should call the meeting to order. The minutes from the November 20th meeting were sent electronically. Any edits or corrections to those? If not, get a motion for approval.
Move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye. Okay. Standing reports. Interim Program Agency Coordinator.
You have a presentation on your desk there, the medical director's training.
Okay.
Going out in an electronic format. Dr. David has reviewed that and has agreed with it. Want to pass around if anybody wants to take a look at it.
Sure.
If anybody wants any additions to that, please let me know. There'll be a short 10-question test just to make sure everybody wants to do it and register on our testing site. That way we have a list of all the doctors that are active and participating in that control.
Okay.
I'll come back to this.
It's like if you go out to the hospital or something, you can
That's
that's what they
a
do.
requirement of the personnel. We have to maintain a list of anybody who answers the phone program.
So just a quick discussion with the local docs here. Does everyone envision this as the medical directors of our respective departments ensuring that this is completed by the physicians?
Yeah, we should be making sure. It would be nice to
Yeah,
know from
thank you.
here.
It's good by me.
Yeah.
The online training just for med control. You haven't gotten a list of all the docs that have taken that. Is that available?
This is the first.
The first one. I'm talking about the one that we had online. The test online where I believe it was UR, just for general medical control.
It's for Monroe County.
For Monroe County, right.
So those credentials for them.
But we had decided, probably a year ago,
This
that
is
would.
that training.
So, so now you're updating it for specifically our force.
So this will be more for the Finger Lakes region, correct?
So do we need to have people doing both?
Do we need to all retake this?
We don't have a list from Melrose of the providers that take it.
It's the same test?
I'm not sure. There's Jack's coming up with the questions for it.
So I have several physicians from
See them on Facebook.
Monroe County that have taken the Monroe County one, and I do not believe they should have to take two tests if it's covering the same material.
It is the same.
I would support that.
So as long as we do the same thing as we do with out-of-area providers for paramedics, they just register and let us know they're taking it, and then we'll just put it on the list as completed. That's fine. That way we can get an active list.
Great. Yeah.
So Nate and I briefly discussed this. Whose responsibility is it going to be to ensure that the physician has taken or is certified in med control?
I guess that's really going to be a question for the Department of Health. I mean, the hospital's responsible for making sure the people that answer the phone are credentialed and are doctors, but we as a region are also required to make sure that the people that answer the phone are credentialed as doctors. So I'm not sure where the liability lies, but it is specific to the region, the REMAC, that we have to credential medical control physicians.
I think we need to generate an active list of all the docs that have taken it in Monroe County and or here, and then it's the medical directors of each respective hospital that's responsible for making sure anyone that's not on the list gets tested in one place or the other. That would be my recommendation.
Get that list from phones.
So then once this goes live, if they haven't done the training, we have to ask for a different doc, basically?
That's a question for the hospitals. How do you verify that taking an answer the phone?
We need to have a deadline. We need to create a deadline at least, so we need time to get this done to make sure. I wouldn't start it right away because we have a one-doc shop at times, so we need to make sure that we're.
At the same time, this is the course, and what's there, anybody done it? What's the estimated go-through time?
It takes about
40 minutes. So, I don't think it's unreasonable to put, a couple months time frame on something like that.
We took the Monroe one,
Yeah.
what, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
a year and a half ago, so.
And then the question is, how often do you
Yeah.
refresh?
Recommendations on that?
So I would
practices. As far as how often.
Yeah, I think this is one of those same types of questions where, how often do you have to get certified in the NIH? I don't think that there's, I think it's within this body that we determine that. I don't know the right answer. 5 years, 10 years, indefinitely?
We
mean,
have to make paramedics have to retest, right, since they did their original.
We have so much testing that we do outside of this as well. I think the main thing is we need to make sure that all of our physicians are on board and understand, what your current,
I would recommend that if there's a protocol change,
Disseminate to the doctor.
we would disseminate it back down and retest. If there's additions, then we simply disseminate that, but no retest.
Otherwise, you just don't
Look,
test.
for instance, I think Catorlac would be mainstaying order for 15 milligrams, something like that, at the last episode. So that would just be an update to all the docs, saying, hey, you may see patients coming that aren't receiving this, but not a complete retest.
Yeah.
Protocols.
What about the recommendation to just disseminate changes to the physicians and, because it would be difficult to then just test for that one specific item, correct?
And I would say that, that's an appropriate thing, is just, updating with changes, because admittedly, once you kind of do the med control thing, if you give me as many tests as you want, I'd rather just field 3 calls.
Yeah.
I learn a lot more that way, and that makes me a lot.
If you're in active practice and
Yeah.
you're doing med control.
Same thing we do a lot of protocols, just put a policy statement out to the providers and they read it and they're not.
You get it, the med directors, we update our folks with stuff every, 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, and, if that gets included, this, the update to the EMS, med control, et cetera, and it's that.
Protocol change or update.
Right, yeah.
Nate, can we put to the website? We can get a hold of Ben and get the ones that have been credentialed through.
Yeah, we can have 2 lists. We can
Strong
have an active
regional.
providers list and an active med control list on our website, that's fine.
And then we could just
If
disseminate
everybody's okay
that.
with having their name posted as an active.
Yeah, and then Nate and I were talking the most appropriate way to disseminate this may be a PDF file and just with a link to the test.
Yep.
So I would recommend April 1st. Does that sound reasonable?
Say 90 days.
April 1st, almost February, so February, March, that's 2 months.
Well, May 1st.
Well,
May 1st?
We do
May 1st
six-
better.
we do a
Because that-
60-day compliance and then a 30-day grace period when you get back to the hospital medical directors and have you guys actually talk to your folks at that point.
And then that way you can bring it back to the May REMAC.
That would be back in time. With a completed list back.
So May 1st?
So, 60 days, but then we do a 30-day cushion for this body to
Sure.
go back to these actual hospitals.
Does this need a motion?
Because when the Rochester list pops up, and we get a copy of that, is we just distribute that with the,
I can distribute
To
it
the
or
list,
we
or-
can just put it right up on the website and then you guys can just.
okay, just so we know who to press in getting this done.
So it sounds like the motion on the floor is that the physicians practicing within the Finger Lakes REMAC will be certified in med control with a 60-day compliant period and a 30-day grace period. Have a motion for that?
Can you motion? Whatever
May.
you just said. So everyone needs to be credentialed by May 1st. There's a 30-day grace period prior to that. I would also like to add that they need to be credentialed on either Milrems or Finger Lakes. As part of the motion.
Is anyone still using locums? Because the other question would be somebody coming from elsewhere in the state.
We are not. Newark and Clifton are not.
Okay.
That will keep them apprised. So that's my motion. Did I officially state that? We'll have everyone credentialed on either Finger Lakes or Milrems by April 1st and with the 30-day grace period to May 1st.
Make it a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Who's second? That's good. Who seconded it?
Sure. Okay, moving on, FLCC Administrator Program Director.
We're just starting to register spring classes. They go right up until the 4th, I think, of February is the last class that is starting. And so everything is on progress at this point in time. So I'll skip to Jake for the paramedic.
We registered 24 new students for the new paramedic class that started last night. So another big class, which is good. The other class finished clinical, and they're phase 2 time starting phase 3. So they're finishing up. They'll be testing in May. That's it.
Okay. Medical Director Dr. Davidoff has generated a report from the State EMS conference he would like me to review. So medical standards and SIMSCO metrics, there was a survey that went out with a list of 20 or so metrics that New York State could follow this year, and the survey asked people to select the top 5 for monitoring, so more to come. Check and inject, now called, I guess the verbiage is syringe epinephrine. So there was consensus that there was no need to give up on the project. Epinephrine can still be drawn up with a regular 1 ml syringe and administered 1.5 milligrams for peds, 3 milligrams for adults. This is not a change in dosing. Boundtree expects market syringe supply in the near future. No available date has been set yet. New York State, in follow-up to that, has been working on a ART-type handout that will go step-by-step for EPI administration, and that should be available by the May meetings. Transfer protocols, there was apparently a bad outcome a few years ago where a patient was transferred from ground ALS to air. Air had ventilator problems, did not have a BVM. Ground had already left, so there was a bad outcome. That air service that was involved is no longer around. However, the legislator wanted to ensure this wouldn't happen again, so the current transfer protocols cover most of this, but we are looking at statewide SCT protocols and minimums to help prevent the recurrence of this. New York State collaborative BLS protocols were passed. It was the first BLS protocol, new BLS protocols in 17 years. They need to be approved by Commissioner Zucker, and then they can be put into place. And once approved and trained, they can be used, but they need to be in place by August 1st of this year. Updates on the collaborative protocols were approved. Ketorolac 15 milligrams IV or IM was approved without med control. Oral acetaminophen and ibuprofen, weight-based dosing was approved for pediatrics for pain and fever, and once training is completed, these can be utilized. Syringe epi and albuterol for EMTs and higher, not CFRs. CFRs may use auto-injectors. Tourniquet application and removal is needed, if needed, is okay by CFRs and above. So the new protocols have a good section on technology-assisted children discussing G-tubes, ventilators, etc. Every agency needs to have a mutual aid policy in effect. No change in the transfusion service, but should an agency need to transport blood or blood products in a dire emergency, Wadsworth needs to be notified by the blood bank. Age for EMT certification has been changed to 17. And just a reminder, EMS Week begins May 19th, and EMS Memorial is May 21st. Apparently, New York State the Bureau will be putting out a newsletter 3 times a year now. And there has been a move to make EMS an essential service, much like fire and law enforcement. This was tabled to the next meeting for more information to look at possible ramifications of this action. More information, look to the General Municipal Law Section 122B. And that's Jack's report from the state meetings. Mr. Haig, anything from SIMSCO?
Excuse me, more just name from what was given in the CMAQ report. Everything that was put forward from CMAQ to SIMSCO was passed, including the statewide BLS protocols and the collaborative changes. It's really, it happens at CMAQ, it usually happens at SIMSCO, so that's all I've got.
There was one more thing that was approved as of January 9th. For most of you may already know that in past to take courses in that, in order to go to an EMT class, you had to be 18 by the end of the month in which there was going to be a test. So anyone that would have been testing last Thursday would have had to have been 18 by January 31st in order to be eligible to test. The state has taken that down to 17 now. The policy statement's coming out, but it was approved on January 9th. There have been some discussions amongst several of us as far as what will this do for agencies or whatever. This was supposedly to help the volunteers to come back up through the ranks. I can see where it may help in the high schools that are trying to have their students go to EMT class and that. It may cause a little angst for the EMS provider agencies because now you can realistically could have a 16-year-old in your quarters. So in conference with legal, their suggestion was that the agency step back and take a look at what your rules and regs or policies are. My concern is our concern is from the precepting aspect, is to the fact that you may have technically a 16-year-old that you are precepting during a course versus a 17-year-old. And I know it doesn't sound like much, only 1 year, but it can be physically, mentally, whatever we want to call it, a bit of an issue. So we are going to take a look at it from training and ed. We always go back through the student manual and take a look and see if we need to make any changes or anything along that line. And so you as agency providers probably will need to do the same. Sorry.
Any other comments on that? Okay, Advanced Practice Committee?
We met beginning of the month. Not a whole lot to report. We do have the trainings coming up this year opposite the ALS committee meetings. The first one will be first Wednesday in February at Wayne County on BLS and airway management.
Presenter will be Jason Hagg.
Presenter will be me. That's probably going to shy some people away. We discussed some projects for the coming year. One of the things that you heard in Dr. Davidoff's report that actually is made at the state level is SCT protocols that we're going to take a look at with a small tag here from the regional ALS committee involving our air medical services and the ground services that already do SCT care, including Finger Lakes Ambulance, Newark, and Canandaigua, and AMR. We're going to get together on that, and our hope is, with this being taken up to the state level, it's like a standards of excellence statewide, that if this region gets them together, we can move into the collaboratives and then maybe make it a statewide SCT guideline and kind of be the leaders for that, as opposed to waiting for the typical state technical advisory group delay. If we can come to them with something already written, that's our plan. Other than that, business as usual at the ALS committee, and nothing else to report there.
One thing that came up late for the ALS committee, too late to put out to them, on the 11th and the 13th of February, North Seneca Ambulance will be hosting Nina Doyle from Mercy Flight Central, who will be providing a class training and hands-on for humeral head ID insertion. We've all done tibials, but there was some question about the training for humeral head. So we'll be hosting at 6 o'clock North Seneca base on the 11th and the 13th of February.
Someone's going to call and ask.
Sorry?
One or the other, or do they have to attend
No,
both
it's
sessions?
one or the other. Trying to get our front end of the week and back end of the week crews covered.
Moving on, Mercy Flight. Oh, sorry, Mike.
RSI committee.
RSI committee.
Yeah. you might-
Sorry.
No,
Yep.
it's okay. It's okay. I'm easily missed. So as you know, we have the goal of the RSI committee was to have an RSI class for 2019. We established guidelines and a timeline for it, and the current timeline is for this body to approve the names of candidates for this class. I had sent already verification forms to the candidate signed by the ALS chief of the agency and the agency medical director. So what is your pleasure? Would you like me to just read all the names and then somebody can make a motion to approve, or do you want me to just do each individual? Okay, so I don't need a motion. I'm just going to name the names for you guys. So for Victor Farrington, it's Matt Tornatore, Matt Jankowski, Kevin Russo, and John Matrano. For Wayne County ALS, Frank Adams, Eric Burns, Dan Courtney, Kayla McDonald, Keith Simon, and Matt Wadsworth. For Madison and Town, Jamie Callard and Alana Johnson. For Yates County, Jeremy Harris, North Seneca, Mike DeMazin, and Jay Pelton. For Canandaigua, Michelle Cole and Betty Hubbard. For Newark, Lou Varr. And for Finger Lakes, Brian O'Kay, Zach Twilliger, Eric Williams, and Yogi Zabriskie. AMR at this time decided to not apply for agency status, so they will have to apply next year. So the RSI committee voted to approve these names upon handing the signed forms. So I just wanted to bring these names to you.
With approval of the agency medical directors.
Yes. And if you'd like them, I have extra copies. I can submit these to you. I did send them out to Donna for dissemination. So the next step, once approved of these names, is I will give it to Dr. Surratt to talk about disseminating information to the candidates for the class. The other next step is that I also have an RSI provider verification form, which is different from this one. The RSI committee had asked that every year agencies identify the providers that are still RSI and are still being approved by their medical director for RSI. So I'll be disseminating that in the next couple of days. Dr.
Have you guys set a date for the class yet? No? Okay.
The format's most likely, there's a series of readings and pre-tests. We used to just give all the readings en masse, 160 pages of
Because I know we tried to
stuff.
do it at the conference before, so I wasn't sure.
Well, everyone gets all the readings and then reads it the night before, which wasn't the intention. So we just got to set up the website properly, but we'll probably have 3 or 4 releases, partial releases of the reading. So probably be release, post-reading confirmation test, release, post-reading confirmation test. And that's all done with approximately 2 months' notice. We'll get together with the physicians and schedule the practical day.
Dr.
Process
Sarah,
it.
LMS, we could probably host that on. I'll talk with you more offline. Might make it easier.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, with all the scheduling constraints, both by the agencies and the physicians, my guess is that this process, starting now, would probably be completed by the end of June.
So I suppose we need a motion to approve those can we do that as a whole, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, it's a committee motion because the people within the motion all met criteria. It was simply a criteria selection. So, one of the criteria is you had to have approval from the medical director before you came to the committee. Secured from everyone.
Yep. And I have those right here. They've already been disseminated.
We shouldn't approve them individually because it was only criteria that we were set. So either they met it or they didn't. If we don't approve someone that met the criteria, then there's a whole process. So it's a committee motion. I mean, there's no second required.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Okay. Moving on, Mercy Flight Central.
Just a couple of quick things. First, thanks everybody for your understanding with all the weather issues we've been having lately. Today, hopefully, is a good sign. There's sunshine and some blue sky out there. We'll have some warm, some flyable weather. The other thing, just quick, is we've set the date for our Spring Education Day. It is going to be Friday, May 31st. I know it sounds like it's a long time away, but it fills up fast and time flies. So, but I get that out there. You'll be getting more information soon on that if you want to pencil that in for a hold the date, Friday, May 31st for our annual Education Day. And that's it. Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Sure. LifeNet.
Yes, we will be hosting a utilization review and an open house at our base in Seneca Falls on March 1st at 7 p.m. So all agencies are invited to attend. And we'll also be continuing to schedule LZ classes throughout the spring and summer coming up. And also very happy to announce that we have Air Methods has entered into a in-network provider agreement with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of both Excelis and Empire plans. So hopefully there will be zero balance billing coming for folks that participate in that life insurance.
Anyone from Guthrie? Any other agencies? What's that?
Anything from the hospital?
I'd like to say a few things just for Newark. Just want to let everyone know that as of February 1st, we will be treating all of our walk-in STEMIs with thrombolytics. We finally have our cardiology team on board, so we're happy about that. We are looking to have a 30-minute turnaround time for those not receiving thrombolytics and 45 minutes out the door after thrombolytics. So that will be occurring. Also, I want to just underline that the LVO study was completed several months ago as discussed in this committee. We want to make sure that any strokes in the community, we decided was still going to the spoke hospitals for initial evaluation. We do have a process within the hospital that they will be quickly evaluated, and if it is felt that they do need endovascular treatment, that they will be turned around quickly, and CT angio will be done at the receiving hospital, but we're finding out that we're getting some agencies that are bypassing us for strokes that they believe are large vessel occlusion. So I just want to underline, please, that strokes need to be going to the closest spoke hospital first. And then we've been very successful giving thrombolytics of the appropriate strokes for a long time. Had gold standard care at our hospital. So I just wanted to.
I thought there was a discussion that if they had the gaze or they had met that criteria that we were supposed to divert.
So that was a pilot project, and that has long since been completed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we at this point, research still supports it in getting thrombolytics initially, depending on how they present, and then going on for endovascular treatment if needed. And CT angio will be done at the receiving hospital, not at the first. So it's still a very quick turnaround. Thank you.
Sure. Old business, I think we have already touched on physician credentialing. And then
The conference is coming together. We should be printing today and mailing out all of the brochures. We had a couple of more slots to finish in with some guest speakers. And I hate to put you on the spot, Dr. Michelin.
Oh, my own spot? Guest speaker. This is with RSI, correct?
No.
Or
No. As far as with the new study for the strokes, would you like to speak at the conference about that so that the providers understand that they no longer have to bypass?
when is this conference?
February 22nd and 23rd?
Yes, let me look at my calendar and
I will get a hold of you. But at the end of this meeting, though.
February 21st and 22nd?
22nd and 23rd. I think the stroke we had scheduled for Friday the 22nd.
Okay.
But I will double check before we leave here. But that will be a time to get it out because everybody now is kind of confused as to which direction they should be going. And so you help me away.
Sure.
We will do that with the We'll do it at a Diane can do the
Okay. Moving on to new business.
From Council, Finger Lakes Regional EMS Council, we have a seconded motion to appoint 2 vice chairs to remand. 2 applied and were appointed. There's Dr. Telbeth and Dr. Glick.
Thank you.
So then I sent to all of you the information that was forwarded in about the application for Fishers Fire Department to accelerate up from a BLS, which is a basic life support first responder service, to an ALS first responder service. And so to move forward on this for an approval, we need one of the physicians to approve moving forward with it.
It wasn't ALS, it was AEMT, Advanced EMT response, not ALS response.
Advanced EMT.
Yeah.
But it still would be an ALS.
Right.
AEMT is an
It's not
advanced.
full paramedic response.
Correct.
But they could though if they have that level though, right?
No, if they're only applying up to
For
AEMT. but it still is categorized as an ALS.
I understand there's some discussion.
Thank you very much. Who's officially recording? I have a, is it Donna or?
Doesn't.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the council. My name's James Hood. I am president of Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance. It's a pleasure to be here this morning and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Reading in a letter this morning from Victor Farmington into the record. Council members, this letter is made in response to the application of Fishers Fire District, herein referred to as Fishers, to become an ALS first response agency. Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which I will also refer to as Victor Farmington, does not support the application made by Fishers. It is not in the best interest of our community or agency. We are pleased to offer the enclosed facts and disclose our position and motivations to clear up any possible misconceptions. It is important for the council to be fully informed. Victor Farmington respects that the council must complete due diligence in this matter, and we honor the process that is being followed. We are, however, very concerned that the council has not been provided with complete or accurate information, and we object to any inference that our agency is not acting with good faith or with full respect for municipal law. In fact, no public service agency cares more about ensuring the highest quality and availability of emergency medical services in the towns of Victor and Farmington than Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance. The Finger Lakes Regional EMS Council, herein referred to as the Council, is aware of the tenuous business environment of ambulance services in New York State and in our area. Nearly 7% of ambulance services in the state have closed their doors since 2012, according to the New York State Director of EMS and Trauma in a presentation given in October 2017, reference enclosed. Many ambulance services across our state are losing volunteers and struggling financially. Victor Farmington is a community leader and has been proactively seeking a solution to the problems facing many other ambulance services. We want to ensure the highest quality EMS service for our district for many years to come. To accomplish this, Victor Farmington has partnered with the Town of Victor, Town of Farmington, and Village of Victor, and has been actively supporting the results of the Town of Victor's public safety study, reference also enclosed. Fishers participated in this study, and, as recorded in public meeting minutes, it stated that it would partner with the town and other public service agencies. Despite these assurances, Victor reneged at the last possible moment, reference included. So to appreciate the position of Victor Farmington, it is necessary to understand that we are working diligently with the towns and village to implement the public safety recommendations. Victor Farmington has presented at numerous public board meetings, including all of the municipalities in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Our agency and the towns and village are currently pursuing an innovative solution which will allow the municipalities to cooperate more directly to ensure improved and more cost-effective EMS service for the foreseeable future. Fishers has chosen not to participate in this process. We appreciate that this creates a natural conflict. Victor Farmington is committed to supporting and implementing the plans of the towns and village we serve. Determination of public need. There is no public need for additional EMS in the Fishers Fire District. In reviewing the application for Fishers, this council must first consider that Fishers has failed to, and I quote, demonstrate an absence, reduced availability, or inadequate care which is not readily correctable through relocation or improvement of existing service, end quote. Victor Farmington meets and exceeds the minimum ALS standards required in our district. Victor Farmington and the towns of Victor and Farmington and the Village of Victor are making progress in the public safety study recommendations and working to implement improvements which would provide service superior to that proposed by Fishers. The existing service is already undergoing the process of improvement, thus there is no public need. Fishers' own solicitation letter, reference attached, admits there is no public need, explicitly stating that Victor Farmington's service is not inadequate. For this reason alone, the council must deny the application. Victor Farmington has legitimate questions about the service improvements alleged by Fishers. It is naive to accept the claim that the intent of Fishers is simply to offer improved service. The council must consider that in previous years, Victor Farmington has agreed to station paramedic-level ambulances at Fishers fire stations for minimal to no charge. These past arrangements provide a faster, dedicated response at the paramedic level of emergency medical service at a lower cost than what Fishers is proposing. The past arrangements also maintain the integrity of our contract with the town of Victor. This alternative and associated consideration has not been disclosed by Fishers in its application to this council. Inability to provide ALS services. Fishers' request for a waiver, also reference attached, from the duty to act based on quote-unquote availability is highly unusual and is a fundamental flaw in its application. The request for waiver itself is sufficient evidence that Fishers staffing is inadequate to provide ALS service. Again, for this reason alone, the council must deny the application. Fishers' narrative states, and I quote, "Upon approval to function at the ALS-FR AEMT level, the 5 current personnel certified at the proper level will be responsible for delivery of AEMT care," end quote. However, Fishers' cover letter conflicts with this and states that Fishers, quote, "seeks REMAC written approval to operate at the BLS first response level during periods in which ALS personnel are not on duty or available," emphasis added. Very serious questions are raised by Fishers' request for waiver from providing ALS service based on the concept of quote-unquote availability, which is not defined in its application. Fishers has also not demonstrated how 5 or even 8 individuals are sufficient to staff the 2 apparatus during 4 shifts discussed in its cover letter and application. Fishers furthermore admits that it does not have sufficient staff to provide reliable ALS first response service in its cover letter. The staff Fishers has listed in its application all have other on-scene duties which preclude prioritization of ALS first response. Fishers has also publicly represented that its current firefighting staff are required for the on-scene safety of firefighters and firefighting duties. Yet, in its application, they wish to claim to be using the same staff to provide ALS first response. These duties are mutually exclusive. Fishers' request for waiver in its application is evidence of Fishers' awareness of this deficiency. We also understand that Fishers has previously been granted approval to enroll personnel in ALS courses. So ALS first response approval is not justified for the purpose of educating staff. The fact that Fishers has enjoyed educational pre-approval and is still requesting written waiver for staff availability is itself sufficient evidence that Fishers is not prepared to be granted ALS first response status. Request for an ambulance contract. Please appreciate that Victor Farmington has contracted with the town of Victor under Section 122 of New York State General Municipal Law to provide general ambulance services, BLS, and ALS to the town. We have determined, after review by our board and legal counsel, that the contract, reference attached, proposed by Fishers conflicts with our existing town contract. Please note that general municipal law permits a fire district to contract services under Section 209 of Public Health Law only when, quote, "a town or village has not designated itself as the primary provider or otherwise contracted for an emergency ambulance." The town of Victor has contracted Victor Farmington under Section 122. As part of the municipal certificate of need, herein referred to as the MuniCon process, Fishers must, quote, "provide evidence of a written agreement with an ambulance service," end quote. It is our understanding that Section 122 of General Municipal Law gives the town first right of refusal to determine its ambulance service provider, and the town has exercised its right. Again, Fishers' application must be denied. Fishers admits in Section 2.1 of its narrative that they are aware that Victor Farmington is the primary transport agency serving its portion of the town of Victor. Fishers now cannot claim it is unaware that the town has already exercised its rights under Section 122 and contracted with Victor Farmington for ambulance services. So we are bewildered by Fishers' insistence for an ambulance contract, and we object to the insinuation that Victor Farmington is acting in bad faith or without due respect for the law. The facts show this is not the case. Victor Farmington is already under contract with the town of Victor. Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance will vigorously defend our rights under Section 122 as the town's contracted primary ambulance provider. The applicant's lack of appreciation for ALS first response. The above notwithstanding, it is also informative for this committee to observe that Fisher's proposed contract demonstrates a lack of appreciation of the responsibility of an ALS first response agency. The MuniCon process clearly states that Fisher's is ALS first responder and not the contracted ambulance service provider is, quote, responsible for EMS service and overall compliance with applicable laws and regulations, end quote. Despite this, Fisher's proposed contract includes a clause, reference also attached, explicitly disavowing responsibility for the delivery of ambulance services. The MuniCon process requires that the ALS first responders accept the responsibility of being the prime contractor for EMS in its municipality. Our experience is that Fisher's actions demonstrate a lack of understanding of the responsibilities of ALS first response. We hope this example, along with the others in this briefing, help the Council appreciate and understand Victor Farmington's perceptions with respect to the application. Non-compliance as a BLS first response agency. DOH Policy Statement 0604 regarding BLS first response agencies outlines appropriate best practices and states that it is, quote, vitally important that BLS first response agencies are integrated into local EMS systems, end quote. Furthermore, Department of Health Policy Statement 0604 states that a BLS first response agency, as part of its participation in the local EMS system, must document, and emphasis is added by the Department of Health, quote, agreement with the local ambulance service to transport patients received from the BLS first response agency, end quote. Again, the single requirement in the DOH policy is printed in bold and italicized to emphasize its importance. In fact, Fisher's does not have a BLS EMS agency participation agreement with Victor Farmington, and Victor Farmington has no record of Fisher's ever having requested such an agreement during its entire tenure as a BLS first response agency. The lack of a current BLS EMS agency participation agreement in Fisher's application is evidence that they are not compliant with DOH BLS recommendations and is important evidence for its fitness for ALS first response. We note that Fisher's proposed contract is also not a request for an EMS agency participation agreement, as it is neither proper to form nor content for an EMS agency participation agreement per the template recommended by the Department of Health. Fisher's is not party to any ambulance service agreement or contract with Victor Farmington. Victor Farmington objects to any false or misleading representations or implied endorsements from our agency in Fisher's application. Fisher's does not, and we believe never has had, an EMS participation agreement. Yet Fisher's willfully makes reference to and attempts to incorporate Victor Farmington Ambulance's transport services in its application to this council. Fisher states in section 2.1 of its narrative that, quote, the Fisher's Fire Department currently utilizes the transport ambulance services of Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance Corps, end quote. This is not true. The town of Victor currently contracts and utilizes Victor Farmington Ambulance Services, not Fisher's. Any representation to the contrary is false. Fisher's cannot claim they are operating under the authority of the town of Victor while simultaneously denying the authority of the town to contract with an ambulance agency under Section 122 of General Municipal Law. It is also unconscionable that Victor's reference and leverage our contract with the town of Victor as evidence to compete with us. False or misleading statements about Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance. Fisher's has advised Victor Farmington in an email, also attached, dated January 19, 2018, that it desires to put into the record that Victor Farmington has been unresponsive, and Fisher states that Victor Farmington has not acted in good faith. Victor Farmington did in fact respond to Fisher's in writing, also attached, by certified mail on or about November 4th, 2018, that we did not support Fisher's application. While we appreciate Fisher's disappointment, Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance is under no obligation to endorse Fisher's application, nor are we under any obligation to provide Fisher's a contract. Furthermore, Victor Farmington notes that Fisher's only provided a formal written contract offer, also attached for reference, on or about January 1st, 2019, many years after beginning BLS service. We have been afforded little opportunity for review. In fact, Victor Farmington is attempting to conduct proper review and has engaged the services of counsel as such. Victor Farmington vigorously objects to Fisher's statement that we have not acted in good faith. The evidence demonstrates that Fisher's statement is false. Information withheld from application. It is unconscionable that Fisher's has withheld the good faith responses of Victor Farmington Ambulance and any other interested parties they have solicited from the application and to deny this council the important relevant information. This alone is sufficient information to reject this application. Victor Farmington notes that Fisher's did solicit statements of need / or support from several municipalities, agencies, hospitals, specialty care facilities, and nursing / elder care homes, etc., as part of the MuniCon process. Again, we observe that the responses to Fisher's solicitations are not part of the information it has provided to the Finger Lakes Regional EMS Council. Fisher's make statements about Victor Farmington which they know are not true. Victor Farmington did, in fact, respond to its solicitation and did advise Fisher's that we did not support or endorse its application. The reference is also attached. Despite this, they did not provide this information to the council and wish to claim that Victor Farmington has not been responsive. The best practice for the MuniCon process includes these solicitations and responses. Victor Farmington and others have received Fisher's solicitation. Victor Farmington responded to the solicitation via certified return receipt mail, yet the solicitation letter and Victor's Farmington response are not provided in Fisher's application. Any claim or inference that Victor Farmington has remained silent or failed to disclose our position is in fact false and a misrepresentation. The evidence that Fisher's has withheld pertinent information it has collected as part of the application process is sufficient to deny the application. Financial impact. Fisher's has not disclosed either Victor Farmington's findings of negative financial impact, nor have they disclosed the public safety study's financial recommendations, which corroborate Victor Farmington's analysis. Fisher's, in section 1.9 of its narrative, attempts to claim that it is not Fisher's intent to infringe upon or restrict the ability of Victor Farmington financially. Fisher's behavior demonstrates otherwise. Fisher's participated in and is party to the Town of Victor Public Safety Study. As part of this study, an expert consulting firm was contracted by the town to investigate the state of ambulance service in the Town of Victor. The study's conclusion recommends, and was accepted by the town, including additional community funding for Victor Farmington. Now Fisher's wishes to deny the study and claim they're pursuing an alternate path does not financially impact Victor Farmington's ability to successfully implement the Town of Victor Public Safety Plan. This is false. Fisher's was advised by Victor Farmington of negative financial and other adverse impacts at meetings on or about Monday, July 9th, 2018, at its place of business, and again on or about Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, at Victor Farmington's headquarters, which Fisher's application fails to disclose. Despite Victor Farmington's notification and Fisher's knowledge of the conclusions reached by the Town of Victor's public safety expert consultant, it wishes to ignore the facts and purports to claim there is no negative financial impact. Fisher's also references its tax district to justify funding for its ALS first response application, but fails to discuss or consider the negative effects that its application has on Victor Farmington's ability to retain or secure community funding. Fisher's raised its taxes more than 25% this year, and its behavior clearly indicates that it is competing for this funding source. Yet Fisher's application does not disclose the impact of Victor Farmington's inability to retain or secure additional community funding, and only includes oversimplified and opinionated statements limited to billing services. Closing. Victor Farmington Ambulance Corps Incorporated does not endorse and does not recommend Fishers for ALS first response status. Victor Farmington Ambulance Corps has identified significant, legitimate concerns about Fishers' application that raise serious questions. Fishers' application fails to demonstrate public need. Victor Farmington and the town of Victor are already engaged in, and I quote, the process of improvement of existing service, end quote, to provide EMS staffing and EMS paramedic services superior to those proposed by Fishers, further evidence of a lack of public need. Fishers' application is deficient as to staffing for ALS first response, as evidenced by its own request for written policy relief in its cover letter. Victor Farmington is acting in accordance with the best interest of our community and in accordance with the guidance we have received regarding municipal law. Victor Farmington recognizes the right of the town of Victor to select its primary ambulance service, and Victor Farmington will vigorously defend the rights granted by our contract with the town, including the right to approve or deny EMS participation agreements and/or transport agreements as the primary ambulance agency contracted by the town. Despite the implied claims made by Fishers, Fishers has neither a BLS participation agreement nor do they have a contract with Victor Farmington, and they are unable to attain such. Victor Farmington advises the council that Fishers becoming an ALS first response agency will have a substantial negative financial impact on our agency, despite Fishers' claims to the contrary. Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance Corps respectfully requests that the Finger Lakes EMS Council deny Fishers' application for ALS first response for the reasons stated and evidence provided herein. Respectfully submitted, James Hood, President. Copies to our attorney and our board of directors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Dr. Surratt?
The letter was directed to the council. The CON issues are not part of the REMAC. My understanding is the question to REMAC is, do we approve advancing Fishers' BLS response to give them the ability to make an AEMT response? That's the only question that's of issue here today. The CON issues, the financial issues, the tax issues, the municipal issues are not part of REMAC. The only question is, can they move from one level to the other? We consistently, it's been our practice in REMAC to consistently consider and approve these things. But even in the letter response, the luminous letter response, it's a lot to kind of take just being read in. It's actually, they're appealing to the council. So my suggestion is to deal with the motion at hand, which is, can we advance from, correct, you are making a BLS first response at the current time? Is that?
That's correct.
And your request is to move, to give you the ability to provide the AEMT response.
That's correct. Approval for that and approval to continue to function during periods when we do not have ALS on hand, to continue to provide BLS until we can bring enough staff up to provide ALS at all times.
And that is also consistent. We consistently have corps that advance their level and can provide 24/7. It's actually not a concern how much coverage they can provide. It's merely a request to advance their level of care. And then my other understanding is the difference between BLS first response, which you would be making anyway, and AEMT response is your ability to place an IV, give a dose of epinephrine intravenously in the event of a cardiac arrest, and give intravenous glucose. That's the only change in practice that you, and intubate.
Yep, so endotracheal intubation, IV IO access, cardiac epinephrine, dextrose, and there might be some small things, but essentially that's it. And one of the large goals there, certainly our response time to cardiac arrest is substantially lower than Victor Farmington, and we're looking to bridge the gap from our arrival to their arrival in periods where cardiac arrest or patients are critical.
And in your opinion, or the opinion of your agency, the increasing techniques or procedures that you would be required to do would only be done on patients that are most likely required to be transported to hospital.
That's correct.
Cardiac arrest, airway problems, people needing fluid, or people needing IV or IO access,
That's correct.
and diabetics. So the only possibility would be a D50 wake-up that could potentially be signed off, although you would, on placing the IV, I believe it's protocol to also call a transporting ambulance.
So, and we have internal policy that dictates when we can and cannot perform a sign-off. And for anyone that it would require ALS level care or assessment based on New York State protocol, we would require an ambulance to take over care, and in those cases, we would not be able to do a sign-off.
So that was my understanding of the request for advancement, and to be honest, to digest the information in Mr. Hood's presentation, I don't think, I would not know how to do that in this time period at this council. I mean, some of the
right to table.
Yeah.
So
This isn't council.
This council has the right to table.
May I speak quick?
Sure.
I'd like to say that, President Hood is the voice for our agency, and the agency does support him. However, the concern of mine as the ALS chief, and I've spoken with Lieutenant Cusimano, is clearly the fact that while I agree that it's a good idea, however, my concern is for my providers. And I don't want to go on a call in Fishers and have every patient have an IV. That takes away from my provider's skills, and that takes away from, and also for intubations. I understand that cardiac arrest that is important to add an airway, but they can only do King Airways. My fear is they put a King Airway in somebody that has a viable airway for intubation. That also takes away intubations from my provider. It may seem petty, but the skills in Fishers, if I take away skills in Fishers, then I have residents in Victors and Farmington that need those skills, and that's less attempts.
That's already been addressed within our region in areas that have AEMT level of care. We've approved that level of care, and we had the discussion about dilution of stuff a long time ago, and I actually made that argument that AEMTs should not be intubating because they don't have the exposure. And it was voted on, and it was voted down by the REMAC at the time.
So AEMTs can do full intubation on adults. They can do pediatrics.
And I don't agree with that. I have a hard enough time trying to get intubations for my providers in 3 towns. It's going to be even worse in 2 towns.
So is it appropriate to delay that advanced airway management to your patient for the betterment of your provider skills so that you can perform 2 minutes earlier?
But I don't believe it's a delay, a significant delay.
There's a significant delay from East Victor Road to Eastview Mall than there is from High Street.
Fisher's own application indicates
I'm not
that
trying to
the
argue
delay is minimal. They would be hard pressed to perform.
What is the delay?
What
What is the anticipated delay?
So our reports from the last year show that our on-scene time to transfer of care of patients that have been transported is 8 minutes.
I think the other point that you would make is they're going to continue responding at the BLS level anyway. They already have a BLS response in place. So my understanding is in the event of a cardiac arrest at Eastview Mall, your BLS first responders would respond to a time to compressions and a time to shock to reduce it.
Yes.
So I just go back to the question, the only question that the REMAC can answer is, do we approve Fishers going from a BLS first response level of care to an ALS response level of care? We don't have to deal with the quality assurance issues, the state issues, the CON issues, the taxation issues, the funding issues. We don't have to deal with any of that. All we have to do is, the question is, do we support the movement from BLS to ALS or to AEMT? And we've already, our practice in this meeting and this committee has, for a long time, I can't remember a time that we've ever refused a service increasing the level of care to provide to its patients. So,
I discussed with Dr. Davidoff before coming today, and that was my impression of the intent of this, was providing better patient care. President Hood, to be honest, as we discussed, to digest some of the the information in your letter, I'm not sure if I would be able to make a fair argument. And Dr. Syret, makes a good point. I mean, if this has been the standard of this body to simply, address the question whether an agency can, advance their level of practice, then I would suggest that that's the question on the floor.
Well, that's a motion, right? That was the motion that you made, or that you were requesting to be made, that I believe Dr. Davidoff was making.
Okay, I wear a couple of hats in here, okay? I'm the medical director for Victor Fire Department. I work with Dr. Brecker, Dr. Davidoff, one of the assistant medical directors for Victor Farmington, full disclosure. I'm a resident of the village of Victor. I mean, these guys are going to come save my ass when I have my heart attack one day. Let's be honest. And I also have experience with Naples, which tried to do something similar. They tried to do part-time ALS. It didn't work out. I ended up pulling their ALS certification. I know the precedent says support this, but I just don't. I'm familiar with these agencies. I show up on scene for these guys. These guys do great work. I show up on scene for Victor Farmington when I can. So I'm familiar with everyone here. But wearing these hats as Victor Fire, as the assistant down at Victor Farmington, as a resident, and with my experience with Naples, which tried something similar, I just can't support this advance. I know it's unprecedented to do this, but I just can't. I just have to go on record, all my hats wearing this, that I kind of oppose this at this point. And I think these guys are great. I'm familiar with the Victor Farmington.
Do you have an objective reason why?
I just don't think there's a need for it.
But that's not the question that's being asked. The question that's being asked at the REMAC is, can we advance our level of care?
Okay.
It's got nothing. It doesn't matter if it's Victor. I have a huge problem if I have a BLS agency that I want to advance to the ALS agency, and I'm restricted based on CON issues or financial issues. That's something to be dealt with at the REMSCO and at the council level. The question at hand is, can an agency move from a BLS first response to an ALS first response?
Would Victor Farmington agree with that assessment?
Victor Farmington does not agree with that assessment. Part of the assessment of determining whether an agency is fit for ALS first response is indicated by their behavior. A lot of the evidence I've provided here is not just face value based on the CON or based on financial, but is also intended to demonstrate to you the behavior of this agency. If based on that evidence, you believe that this is appropriate and that these people meet the minimum standards for being an ALS first response agency, that is your choice. But I believe the evidence is very strong. I'd also note, Doctor, based on your information, that the application was only published about 3 days ago. So my ability to provide this response has only been in the past few days. So I share your concerns about my ability to respond in such a short period of time, and for not only this body, but for Victor Farmington to have the opportunity to digest this. So if there are any questions about your ability to actually digest and completely understand the information that I've provided, tabling this motion is clearly in order.
No, it's not, because the question you're asking us to answer is not the question on the table. That's the issue.
I'm asking you
the
to
question you're
answer
asking us to answer is a question for the council.
Fitness is an issue for the council, not the REMAC.
The REMAC is only here to say, do we support, as physicians, do we support a move from a first response BLS agency to a first response ALS agency? If you have an issue with an agency responding, that needs to be taken up with the council and the state. Because if you think that they shouldn't be responding at the AEMT level, you should also be thinking they don't respond at the BLS level, and you should formally put that to the state that their certification should be removed. Our job is to answer, do we support the BLS to ALS move? And that's the only question.
I don't have the MuniCon process in front of me. The MuniCon process does have some rich language, including approvals at this level and at the state level are both required. Our interpretation of that is that this body also has some authority to make a decision. Again, I'm not an expert on these things. I'll leave that to you guys I'll leave that to this body to determine.
Dr. Syret, so one thing that I think that we've done a good job at, and Mr. Hood pointed out, a lot of information. One thing we've done a really good job at is not pointing fingers in this, and he referenced...
Victor
that
Farmington would object to that.
Pardon me. He referenced that we didn't identify public need, and that was done with intent, and it was stated that way in that letter. We don't want to point a finger. We want to do our jobs, and we want to do it at the best of our ability. Moving to ALS first response, and we have been overly clear that we're not looking to park our own ambulance in our bays. We're not looking to transport. We're not looking to take away service for anybody else. We're looking to provide our taxpayers with the absolute highest level of care. We made an assessment of that and said, we don't need to be a full-blown paramedic agency. We need to bridge the gap for people that need an intubation, an IV, a dose of epinephrine. We need that, and we need to provide that level of care right now. We're not looking to take away, we're looking to add. And we have done, at least in my opinion, the best that we can do, not to point a finger, but to try to lead the way in the right direction.
Well, what I would say, actually, Drew, is when I came here, I read your application. I was actually impressed by your application because you've done something that no other agency has gone ahead and done, which is basically take the collaboratives, analyze them, find the additional requirements that are required for AEMT, and with the change in the collaboratives recently, that's a new process. And I mean, you got all, I mean, you know that, I talked to you about it, you got all the points. What I would say is that to counter the negative votes, and I will vote for this motion 100% of the time, because, and I'll tell you why. I want my patients and the patients that are critically ill with time-critical medical conditions to receive the care that they require as soon as humanly possible. Evidence points to the fact that time to CPR, time to shocking, time to intubation all benefit the patient. It cannot be done at the BLS level, and any physician that is saying that that's not true, I challenge them to show me the evidence that they're harming patients. But based on the fact that I believe that this will get care to a patient's site sooner and will benefit it, regardless of any CON issue, I support this, and I will vote yes for this.
Thank you.
I'm done.
As a non-transporting agency, one of the points that I heard in your presentation was that you do not have an agreement with Fishers to transport.
The BLS participation agreement, Fishers, to our record, has never sought one.
So if Fishers responds, who will then transport the patient?
So currently, the procedures for Victor Farmington, and they respond to our entire geography. So they are dispatched as the primary ambulance. They maintain their mutual aid agreements for ambulance services to provide coverage in, and we don't have an issue with that. One thing I will add in regard to that is an agreement was never in place, and I took over operating, kind of running our EMS program at Fishers about 4 years ago, and and it's certainly my fault. I didn't realize we didn't have this agreement in place. When we started going through the process of what do we need to do, and I started to learn more about the Department of Health policies and regulations, I said, oh shoot, we don't have an agreement in place. That was identified back in October, and we made a pretty substantial effort to try to put an agreement in place, including Fishers making board resolution to put that into place, and we've sent those documents over to Victor Farmington. On failure of them to respond to those over the last couple of months, I reached out to Ross Astro of the Department of Health and inquired as, hey, what do I do? Department of Health policy statements for both BLS and ALS state that a non-transporting EMS agency must have in place an agreement for services. I said, we've made a pretty substantial effort with no response to this point. What do I do when I submit my stuff to the state upon approval of the REMAC? And Ross Astro's opinion was just document it, and also document the other services that hold CON in your area. And that's not an interest that we have to, we don't want to pursue that. We want to provide a EMT first response and hand our patients off to Victor Farmington. That's what we want to do. But I have to document to the state because I don't have an agreement, and since October we've made multiple efforts, and we've had no response. I haven't heard from Mr. Hood, and I've sent him 3 or 4 emails.
So So I'd
I
like
sent
to
a certified
respond,
mail,
I'd
and
like
I
to
have
respond to
further
that, because this
response.
is the sort of behavior that Victor Farmington is talking about, is evidence of fitness.
Hey, Matt, just on,
Transport
on
ambulance.
time, can we call the question?
What's that?
This is a public hearing issue. This is not there's a motion on the table, and I'm requesting to call the question. I guess that we're allowed to do that?
That's an order, sir. Time to end discussion. It's your privilege and vote.
So the proposal is to advance Fishers from a basic responding agency to an AEMT.
Non-transporting.
Non-transporting, I'm sorry.
That's correct, and also to provide BLS care in times when we don't have ALS until we bring staffing up.
Which is the state standard. Paramedic agencies provide BLS care all the time when they don't have a paramedic on scene, so.
So may I have a motion?
Motion's on the floor. Question's been called.
Any more discussion? Obviously not. All in favor, say aye.
No, it's gotta be the doc, gotta vote.
Yeah, it'll have to be a roll call vote.
Gotta be a roll call vote.
We even have, since we have enough docs here.
Yeah,
Yes,
it doesn't
quorum
matter.
is two.
Quorum is
Quorum is
two
two.
here, believe it or not. Okay.
So who's, the motion came forward from Dr. Davidoff, correct?
Correct.
Who's making the second?
I'll make the second.
We've had discussion. So now we need a roll call vote. So, Dr. Bonsanto?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that the physicians just give their name, their vote, and that eliminates all the
It doesn't on that.
identification.
It doesn't on
Yes.
Bill Montesano opposed.
James Sire, for.
Rita Michelin abstained.
Ryan Brecker opposed.
Me left. Matt Talbot, do I vote?
Yes.
Given precedent, I will say yes.
So we have 2 yes, 2 no's, and an abstention.
So the abstention normally falls to the motion based on Robert's rules. So it's a 3-2 yes. What's that?
Sturgis is everyone.
Third, I don't know. Your rule.
Carries? Motion carries or not? Mr. Parliamentarian?
So 2-2-1 goes to yes. That seems odd.
The abstention goes towards the motion in the event of a tie.
Does everyone agree on that?
No, I thought an abstention was a no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the maker of the motion was not present in the room, but has a written affirmative vote, should probably be considered, since this appears to me to be a tie vote.
Do the bylaws of this organization allow proxy voting in advance of the motion being placed?
The motion came to the floor based on a written affirmative action from the chairperson.
Understand, but he is not here, and the bylaws of the organization have to permit proxy voting in order to be considered a vote.
Our practice is to use proxy voting in the past.
It has to be written in the bylaws of the organization. It's a New York State requirement for not-for-profits and corporations. So does
Sounds like
electronic
we'll have
voting.
another motion to appeal at the council level when you take this to the council, which is where it should have been.
Well, I think now the two questions are a 2-2 vote with one abstention. What is the actual role in that? Dr. Syret is saying that abstention becomes a yes. I don't think that would be the case. If anything, I would think the abstention would flip to a no.
According to our current bylaws, an abstention is not counted for or against. Therefore, my observation is that this vote is at an impasse, at a tie.
Can I make a second motion, difference? I believe I can if we haven't voted on the
I have
first.
to act on this stuff.
Got to work on this one first.
I can put a second.
Or you can change your vote.
So this is an impasse? To bring forward to the March meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
I do believe we need more time, we need to have more discussion, we need to have, both sides have not had a chance to fully present and counteract,
It would be nice to have
each
Jack
other's
here.
discussion points.
It also sounds like this has to go to the council.
Most of the
No, it
items that are
doesn't.
being questioned to be discussed at this body are not, this is not the theater for these discussions. CON matters are purely dealt with at the REMSCO level. Items such as fitness, need, financial impact. This body simply has the job to decide if they are going to support the movement of this agency going from BLSFR to ALSFR. And my advice to Victor Farmington and their opposition for this would be to provide that 7-page opposition that was just read to the council prior to their next meeting, so the council could be informed and we're not sitting at an impasse for an hour of our time.
So it's been provided in this meeting. The proper time, according to our attorney, the proper time for us to provide this was when we provided it, when the council provided us the opportunity. So Victor Farmington is doing what we are legally required to do.
But you are presenting this to the wrong body, sir.
I am presenting information about the fitness of this agency to be an ALS first response agency, which is indeed the question on the floor for this, at this motion.
It's out of order.
Precisely.
This group does not conduct fitnesses.
Then what are you deciding?
Whether they go from BLS to ALS, then it goes to
Based on-
REMSCO.
based
and
on-
they make
based on
their
what?
application.
The recommendation.
Their application to the doctors.
So I'm
After that,
discussing
it
their
goes to
application.
REMSCO, and REMSCO makes the final decision, and with the state and the public hearing process.
It would be unheard of for in any body in this state, for an application referencing another party, for example, Fisher's application referencing my agency, for you to deny me the ability to respond to the things that are in their application. They are part of what's in front of this body because it is part of the motion.
I don't
There
think-
is no separate, you can't separate that. The motion includes the application, therefore the application and everything in it are in question. It would be unprecedented to deny me the opportunity to present rebuttal to the information in their application, which is part of the reason why my attorney has asked me to present it here.
I don't.
If you choose to deny that, that is your choice and at your risk.
I don't have a vote in this, but I'm not a doctor. However, I think you did have ample opportunity to put your feelings into it, and we let you read the whole thing just a minute ago. All your objections, all your information was put into record.
So he
you
was
had the opportunity to
disagreeing
say
that it was. I'm just,
I don't think you disagreed that
I'm
you
not
did.
disagreeing,
You
it's
said you
just
did.
not the right theater to
That's
make
right.
this argument. This is not the body that's going to vote on sending the CON approval to the state, to CMAQ and SEMSCO for approval.
in the MuniCon process, there is no hearing.
It still needs to be approved by the region.
That's not my understanding.
This is merely a discussion to generate the opinion of whether or not the council, the EMS council, believes that Fishers should be allowed to practice at the AEMT level. And they wouldn't be able to do that until their CON is approved, correct?
So the process for municipal CON would be, I receive approval from the REMAC, and I submit directly to the state. We have then a 2-year period where, in which we can practice at the AEMT level, and I need to submit the
Several
problem for the-
agencies
for the
have
traditional
used the
CON.
municipal CON process because it doesn't require a hearing until 2 years later. So you basically, the municipal, and this is the protection, so if an agency was to disappear overnight, a town can put in place an ambulance service, or a municipality can put in place a response service immediately, have it work, and then go back to the state 2 years later, and then prove that it worked. That's it.
So since we've already taken the vote on this, what's the bylaws on a 50-50 vote?
Well, it's tabled, so.
Dr. Cyrus?
So does it get kicked down the road to the next meeting? Is that what the bylaws say?
It's not disapproved, it's not approved. It's put on the agenda table, actually. It's put on the agenda. for-
And I will withdraw my statement that this needs to go to the council lead under municipal CON.
Thank you.
May I make one comment here? Municipal CON was established out of a scenario in which a municipality, which we are as a fire district, wasn't able to transition. And the state looked at this, and into Public Health Law Article 30, Section 3008, they delineated this exact situation in which municipal certificate of need was established out of this exact scenario, where we have, by that authority of public health law, the ability to do this. And we are seeking approval from the REMAC to provide ALS care. Then we would send it to the state. We would have 2 years to do that, to prove that our services work and that the region then can hold the public hearing and evaluate how we perform during that period of time. What I guess I fail to understand, and respectfully, is Public Health Law Article 30 establishes our right to do this.
I
totally agree with you.
Nobody argues.
And
I don't think there's any argument with your right to apply.
No, it's not the right to apply, it's the right to do it. We have the right as a governing body, as a municipality, as a fire district, we have the lawful right to do this. We're doing it for the right reasons. So this is tremendous, this is tremendously upsetting to me because we have the lawful right to do it.
And I apologize. The only two objections on the board are the Victor Farmington medical directors. Is that my understanding? That's the only objections here. So it's our fault at REMAC that we can't get enough physicians, because I know what Dr. Davidoff's vote, I know what this vote will be next time. I don't think that it's going to impact you significantly, because it's pretty clear that this thing is going to go to the council and be bogged down in legal stuff for a while. But
Actually, it won't even go to the council for another 2 years. It'll go to Samsung.
You go straight to Samsung. I didn't know it was municipal either.
Yeah, it'll go Samsung.
I just apologize. It's just going to be, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that Davidoff's going to support it. He already has. And
Mr. Chairman, I think what's missing here also, and should be solicited for the next meeting, is Mr. Zastro's presence to clarify any state regulations to the physicians who may not know that, and to determine the procedure for municipal law.
I agree. That would be incredibly helpful.
I also think that your written copy should be distributed to all the voting members at least, and possibly to all the members with more than 3 days to look it over and ask questions.
And perhaps a
and such.
response to that by Fishers?
That's normally out of order. The application again, from my attorney's perspective, they apply the application, they are the applicant, I am the respondent. The applicant's application must stand as is. The burden of proof lies on the applicant.
there's no burden of proof.
We do not have a burden of proof. This is a municipal CON. We don't need a burden of proof. Our fire district passed resolution establishing us as an AEMT agency. Lawfully, we have the right to do that.
That's not my
We don't need to establish proof. It was proved through resolution of our fire district.
To the initial question, the letter is read into the record now, so everyone on the board should have access to it.
So
Mr. Chairman, you have opposing views which cannot be resolved at this level, so you need to ask them for more written documentation, if they wish, for the next meeting. You're not going to go anywhere here.
So I agree. I don't think that we're going to make any more advancements today. Anybody else?
And the situation is with my abstention, the point is I do want more information, make a more educated decision. And so,
Agreed.
and the time to be able to review it. That's all I'm asking for. So, again, I just want to express my frustration and the fact that if there's an agreement, there's no agreement between the two agencies that have to support each other, and that you haven't been able to come to some sort of a working relationship, that somehow, if you're not a transporting agency, but you are their contracted transporting agency, that somehow there needs to be olive branches between the two to figure this out, what the Department of Health allows, and for you, because believe me, the conflict between the two agencies is not good for patients either. And I just want to state that for parts of the reason of my abstention, because we have to be in this together. And I know both agencies agree with that. So.
Any other business? Need a motion for adjournment?
Adjourn.
Well,